This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Violet Masoud of DNV about risk-based thinking and the transition to ISO 9001 2015.
Live shows. If only you knew what happened just minutes before we go live. Plus, we're going to learn to lead like a great chef. That and more when we come back, if we come back.
This episode of Quality Digest Live is brought to you by Mitutoyo America. Whatever your metrology challenges, Mitutoyo supports you from start to finish.
And welcome back to Quality Digest Live for May 19th, 2017. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest Editor-in-Chief, Dirk Ducharme. Okay, so our aging infrastructure, bridges, roads, that sort of stuff, have been in the news quite a bit over the last decade or so. In particular, things like bridges and overpasses, some of which have collapsed. And of course, if they collapse, if you have some sort of structural failure in an infrastructure, you can kill people. So it's a big issue going on here in the United States in particular. And one problem is with concrete structures as opposed to, let's say, open beam iron and steel structures. And the problem is that it is hard to know what is going on inside behind the concrete as opposed to iron structures where it's visible on the outside. You can kind of see what's going on. All of these structures have some sort of metal behind the concrete, notably steel rebar, which can't be inspected from the outside. And this rebar deteriorates or rusts over time, which then affects, of course, the integrity of the entire structure. So current methods for uncovering this corrosion use microwaves to record changes in the physical state of the affected steel, this rebar, such as changes in the thickness of the rebar within the concrete. Now, according to NIST, the problem with this method, the microwave method, is that by the time these changes are detectable using microwaves, the corrosion process is already well on its way toward causing cracks in the concrete. So, I mean, the barn door is already open, so to speak. Also, according to NIST, most of the microwave imaging methods rely on comparisons with baseline measurements of the steel taken at the time of construction. So they measure the size of the rebar and all that sort of stuff prior to construction. Later on, they use microwave, they measure it internally, and they see how much it's decreased in thickness or whatever. Problem is, this practice only goes back about 25 years, but the average age of the 400,000 steel reinforced concrete bridges in the United States is 50 years. So there's really not a lot of baseline data available for many of them. So this method kind of has some real shortcomings. NIST writes about all this in their article, Move Over Superman. NIST spectral fingerprinting sees through concrete, Superman, to detect early corrosion. So, given the limitations of this microwave inspection, a different method was needed to inspect below the surface of the concrete and detect damage to the steel framework early on. And wouldn't you know, our buddies over at NIST have developed a non-invasive spectral fingerprint technique that reveals the corrosion of concrete encased steel before it can cause any significant degradation of the structure. And it does this by detecting a couple different types of iron corrosion byproducts, which you and I call rust. Yeah, there we go. And it turns out, I didn't know this, there are actually several different types of rust, the chemical makeup of the rust. Yes, it's not just all one rust. You think it's just rust. No,
I had no idea about that. I seriously did
not. Learn something new from NIST every day.
Every day.
Now the thing is, they can use something called terahertz radiation to detect this rust. And terahertz electromagnetic radiation has frequencies that are 10 to 100 times higher than microwave. Now, with the current advances in terahertz sources and detectors, this new NIST, non-destructive technique I should mention, has the potential to quickly detect tiny amounts of these iron-bearing oxides, rust, from early stage corrosion of steel, whether it's surrounded by concrete or polymer composites, paint, any other protective materials. So what they're doing is, rather than, say, actually measuring the thickness of the rebar, by which point, by the time you detect enough of that, it's too late. They're actually seeing, can we detect any corrosion? Then, depending on the amount of corrosion they're detecting, they can make some inferences as to the state of the metal structure behind it. So it's kind of a whole different method of going about this. And it can do this through up to 2 inches of concrete, which fortunately is within the thickness of the concrete covering the first layer of rebar used in most steel reinforced structures. So next up for the NIST team will be an attempt to find a spectral fingerprint for another type. Remember I said there's several types of iron corrosion. There's yet another type that is formed in the presence of chloride ions, sodium chloride, NaCl, salt.
Salt.
There you go.
Yeah,
salt. There we go.
Yeah.
And where do we find salt? Well, we find salt near seawater and also where they use road de-icing salt.
Back in the
so
East
this is
Coast,
another, there you go. So this is another important point is now they can detect, or they're working on a method to detect corrosion that is caused by salt. And so the importance of all of this obviously is prioritizing infrastructure project. When you got 400,000 bridges, you can't work on all of them at the same time. So if you can go in early and start detecting structures that may be in an early stage of deterioration, or maybe even a late stage of deterioration, you can start prioritizing your projects and know what you got to work on first with a limited budget.
Well, I mean, makes sense because I mean, you put all that together. I mean, salt water and salt de-icing, older infrastructure. I mean, obviously the finger is going to point towards the Northeast, where you have the oldest structures because that's where it was settled.
You're right, the oldest structure.
The Northeast, and you have a lot of road de-icing. I know this from having grown up in Jersey. That's the way it goes. So I mean, that's going to be the infrastructure, the bridges in particular, and the overpasses that are going to most be in need of this kind of analysis. And the other thing that strikes me about this is that, as a non-engineer background guy, I'm always interested in how they come to these engineering solutions. It's always a science first. This idea that there's different kinds of rust, which I know.
Who knew? Yeah,
but I mean that is an indicator of how to create the engineering that will allow you to measure it and get the answer that you need. But the science always comes first, which is it's always interesting to me how that kind of plays out.
And we're going to kind of touch on that a little bit later on as well. Yeah. All right, right first time. We've been hearing that for a really long time, and that's been the mantra for quality folks for decades. I mean, Phil Crosby used that a lot. And the best way to make a good product, obviously, is to make sure that they are built right to begin with. It kind of goes with the you can't inspect quality into a product. These two kind of work together.
Exactly right.
Now the thing is, management system standards like ISO 9001, for instance, provide a platform for doing things right the first time. And so we're talking about like ISO 9001 for quality, or 14001 for environmental management, even industry-specific standards like AS 9100 for aerospace, IATF 16949 for the automotive, or even ISO 13485 for medical device and so forth. So if you're making your product right the first time, you're actually saving time. We don't think about it that way, but you aren't wasting time chasing down problems, dealing with customer issues, or product recalls. Standards help eliminate all sorts of waste, including time. So here to talk a little bit about wasted time, standards, risk, and other things quality management oriented is Violet Masoud, author of the article, Wasting Time is the Biggest Risk of All. Hi Violet, how are you this morning?
Hi Mike, hi Dirk, how are you? I'm good, thanks.
Oh, good. I should say afternoon in your time.
That's right.
Yes.
In your article, you write, quote, the smartest way to save time is to do things the right way from the beginning, each time and every time. Management system standards provide that platform. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I know a lot of people who have gone through ISO 9001 and are trying to keep up with their standards, see standards as a lot of time spent conforming to the standards, documentation and so forth. And a lot of them think, man, this involves a lot of time. So they might go, are you kidding me? Am I really saving time doing this? So how would you address that?
Well, it's funny that you should say that because I've been doing this for a number of years and I've heard that so many times that by incorporating, an ISO management system, they have to follow so many procedures, and with that is a lot of time and effort. But we all know the smartest way to save time is by doing things right and doing them right the first time, as you mentioned. We will always save more money, time, and have a much better, higher quality of product if you do things right the first time. Now, having said that, with regards to the standards, the beauty of ISO 9000 and 14000 is that it is the framework for your organization's management system. If any ISO standard, for that matter, it could be 9000 environmental or any of the other ones that we mentioned, if any of them are actually implemented correctly, the system is actually there to help you improve your business and not just become a set of procedures that make it very difficult for employees to do their job. Going back to the late 1990s, early 2000, I remember going out to visit with some of our customers, and most of the time it was with a quality manager or an environmental manager, and it was always referred to as the quality system or the environmental system, and those were the people that were responsible. It's very different than that now, and I know that when I would go out there, they were always so proud and wanted to show me their manual, and they'd reach over and grab their binder and wipe off about an inch of dust. Clearly, that goes to show you that those manuals were never incorporated to make it easier for an employee to do their job. It was more to fulfill requirements that they thought they needed to do for when their third-party assessor came out. It is very different than that now. The standards are management system tools. It is the intent of the standards is really to provide a structure to manage your day-to-day operations in an effective, consistent manner that makes sense not only to you, but to your employees and to management, and to make sure that when they do their job, they're actually doing it right the first time.
One of the formal additions to the ISO QMS standards, the idea of taking a risk-based approach to looking at your processes. We do a lot of webinars, and there still seems, believe it or not, years into this, or a year or so into this, a lot of confusion over what a risk-based approach means. Can you give us a concrete example of what that means? I mean, for instance, let's just keep it really simple. Let's look at a burger joint, for instance. Just a simple example. What does risk-based management look like for a burger joint?
Okay, well, that's great. So risk-based thinking is something that we actually do automatically, and we even do it subconsciously. The concept of risk has always been a part of ISO 9000. It's just with the new revision, it's more explicit and builds it into the entire management system. So risk-based thinking is, it's already a part of the process-based and just takes preventative action into the day-to-day operations. If we go into your burger joint as an example, which is a great one actually, one of a major risk for a burger joint would be something like a foodborne illness. So the food safety and quality requirements and expectations are set to really protect the organization and protect the brand and the customer. If we were to look at some of the elements that a burger joint might have to focus on to reduce these risks, some of them could be hiring a certified food protection manager, having standard operating procedures in place that really address the temperature of how the food is cooked, how the food is refrigerated, so making sure that we're monitoring the refrigeration, how the organization is dealing with the storage of raw versus cooked products. A burger joint might also want to factor in making sure that their recipe cards contain specific steps for the preparation of food items, and the food safety critical limits, so that's final cooking temperatures, and making sure that they're being monitored and verified, looking at the purchasing specifications, so what's the percentage of fat versus percentage of water, the size of the hamburger. So really, going back to the question, about taking risk-based approach to looking at processes, you can see that when we're talking about a burger joint, they're already taking all of these into consideration. These are risks for the organization, and they have to be identified. And I think people are already thinking in that the risk, in terms of the risk management and the new aspect of that into 9000. But it's something that they already do on a regular basis, but just are not aware of it.
So Violet, another new phrase we hear that's been introduced in ISO 9001 is context of the organization. So can you tell us in simple terms what that means, and okay, why not, how that might apply to our burger joint example as well?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, ISO 9000 2015 actually defines the organization as a combination of context of the organization as a combination of internal and external issues that can have an effect on how the organization develops and achieves its objectives. So if we go back to the burger joint, what kind of external issues would they really have to factor in? So some of them could come from legal issues that arise, competitive issues, market, culture, social and economic environment, whether it be international, national, regional, or local. An organization might factor in external issues such as second or third party audits conducted by interested parties or auditing firms, as well as local and state health departments that might go out there for the burger joint. So really their job is, to protect consumers from food fraud, such as intentional substitution or misrepresentation of menu items for economic gains. Some internal issues would be related to values, culture, knowledge, performance of the organization as a whole. So if I were to take an example of external issues or organizations that we know have changed recently, a very good example of that would be McDonald's. So 10 years ago, McDonald's was known as, where the clown was and the unhealthy food and the hard plastic furniture, and they've really gone through a major rebrand. And a lot of that has to do with the documentary that came out, Super Size Me. That documentary, I think, really made McDonald's take a stand back and look at what their risks really were as an organization. And from there, they rebranded to incorporate the McCafe to cater to the needs of people wanting to live healthier lifestyles. And not only that, to get into the coffee space. So looking at what their competition was doing. So that's, again, external factors. Another example here in Canada is Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is one of the largest coffee chains in Canada, always known for coffee and donuts. They too have gone through a major rebranding, and that is they've introduced lunch, dinner, so it's no longer viewed as just the donut and coffee shop. So I think these are two really good examples of organizations that have had to look at external issues and take a look at what that means as a risk to their organization so that they can actually achieve all of their goals and objectives.
Well, thanks, Violet. I think that is probably the best down-to-earth explanation of context of the organization and risk that I've heard yet.
Yep.
That just makes a whole lot more sense now. So I'm going to watch this recording. We're going to repost this.
Yeah.
All right. Violet, thanks for that. We're going to be presenting a webinar with DNV on this very topic, along with Violet here, titled Risk Management, a Hands-On Approach and Transition Experiences, this Thursday, May 25th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. Violet here will be presenting along with Jason Telzak of JT Environmental Consulting. And of course, I'll be there as your host to ask the questions and stand by and listen to all this great information along with you. So check out the article from DNV below for a registration link, or keep an eye on your email inbox for details of this webinar. Violet, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, gentlemen.
Okay, talk to you later.
Thanks, Violet. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's right. Yeah, keep an eye on your email inbox. We got some more emails coming to you to promote that. So if you want to register for it.
That's just an indication of how good a presentation this is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of good information. And a lot of you still are struggling with that. We've heard that. So if you want to know a little more about risk or context of the organization, tune in for that one on Thursday. Okay. Well, Dirk, if there's any class of people who must live and breathe quality, it really has to be chefs, I think. I mean, you're a great cook.
Speaking of food,
you are. You're a great cook. I can say I've eaten Dirk's food, and I've rarely gotten food poisoning.
Hardly ever.
But so how important also is. It's about process, technique, meticulousness, all that stuff, and that's what goes into creating a fantastic meal, right? But you're a great amateur. But think about how much more it is that's important if you're a professional. Not to mention a Michelin-rated chef. I mean, all that stuff is just amped up to the nth degree, of course. So, more emphasis really is placed in these best-in-class chefs. They place on quality in their workplace, and of course, how important it is for these master craftsmen to demonstrate leadership in creating these truly memorable dining experiences for their customers. So just think about that. And that's the theme of the article, How to Lead Like a Top Chef, which appeared in Monday's issue of the Quality Digest newsletter. You can see it right there. As described in the piece, author Miguel Noguerol set before himself a difficult and really, I think, truly an arduous task. He had to visit and interview top chefs in Spain, France, Singapore, Mexico, and the United States.
That's a tough job.
It was hard. As part of that, it must have been an excruciating experience. I can just imagine. He had to force himself to sample the food and the service at these top-rated home restaurants of these chefs, and his takeaways about quality and leadership really formed the basis of the article. That was a tough job.
Should get hazard pay.
I would imagine. I mean, gosh, had a jet set to all those places and go to these 2- and 3-star restaurants. I mean, hard work. Good work if you can get it. Well,
Michelin star, we should say.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
not Yelp.
Not Yelp stars. It's a little bit different.
2 or 3 Michelin stars, not 2 or 3 Yelp stars. Whole different experience.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's a very, very different thing. Well, the first thing you got to understand about chefs is that they are not just fantastic artists working within the palate of the palate. See what I did there? See, I don't know if you all can see what I did there with that. It's the palate of the palate, right? I mean, see right there, George? Yeah. It's a palate.
Moving along.
That's a palate of the palate. That's what that is. Well, so they're not just that. I mean, the best of them certainly are sensory artists of the highest order. But the restaurant business is also a business, as you can imagine. So turning over tables and outperforming the competition in every manner of the customer experience is the difference between a place that no one ever hears about and a thriving organization that's really built to last. And a chef wants to take charge of the latter rather than muddling through the former. He or she needs to lead in addition to cook if they want to do that. So fortunately, when it comes to leadership, Noguerol's tasteful travels to culinary capitals of the world have yielded some sage advice that's right on time. Not to mention parsley and rosemary. Come on, no? All right, I'm sorry for getting a little spicy there. No rim shot? I didn't get a rim shot for that. We need to have a rim shot on the tape so we can go to it whenever.
It's going to be a long show.
To cue the people when these great lines come along.
Left.
Because they may not know.
They may not get the joke.
They may not get it. So we need the rim shot in there to back that up, man. No? Okay, well, be that as it may. Noguerol's chief takeaway here is that great chefs encapsulate 3 leadership archetypes that we all can emulate. And these include the passionate nonconformist. As Noguerol writes, these leaders integrate enthusiasm and optimism with a clear vision and purpose, unleashing intrinsic motivation to generate constructive action toward achieving personal and organizational goals. All of which is a great way of saying that these leaders lead with their hearts without preconceived notions about doing things because we've always done them that way, right? They're not doing that, okay? The second type of archetype is the determined eagle eye, as he calls it. These leaders, as Noguerol writes, they maintain a broad view of their operations, but at the same time rely on their self-determination and ability to look at the details. These folks are true perfectionists, which isn't such a bad thing when one is seeking performance excellence. Leaders like this don't fool themselves. They see things as they really are and thus can lock onto like problematic areas that demand immediate attention. It's really important. And the third archetype he talks about is the trusted coach. And this is the leader that many of us think they are. I mean, I think about it. I mean, we'd like to be that kind of a leader. Right. I would like to be. But few really measure up. According to Noguerol, they, quote unquote, quote, they integrate interpersonal relationship, meaningful work, and individual consideration, including generous personal attention and mentoring. This type of servant leader focuses on creating a culture of openness and collaboration. And most true learning organizations are led by a trusted coach type of leader. The article asks, which type of leader are you, or which type of leader do you wish to become? Which is good food for thought. I didn't write that one, I just came up with that one.
On the fly.
I'm telling you, just rolling right out. Answering that question honestly will require a look not only into your own heart, but into the culture of your organization as well. Obviously, not every business can or should be run like a restaurant, but these lessons are good ones, I think, for anyone in any quality-focused enterprise. And that was a really good article. I had some fun with it. But I mean, it really was a very good article with some really key takeaways.
There's another thing that anybody who's been to almost any restaurant is they're also having to lead on the fly.
Yes.
It's often a very real-time leadership and hectic. And I mean, a good leader has everything in place and the process in place so that hopefully isn't as hectic. But when you're dealing with, maybe a rush that you weren't expecting, or something goes wrong in the kitchen, maybe it's a little kitchen fire or something, you have to lead on the spot right then. And that's kind of different than, let's say, corporate leadership, a big company, a CEO or of a big company. It's a different, it takes almost a different style. It's very hands-on leadership.
And it's a very left-right brain, if you think about it, because really cooking, that level is extremely creative, but it also needs to be somewhat formulaic, somewhat assembly line. So it's very much a combination of both sides of the brain thinking. So they're very, very interesting people, and I think Noguerol's right. I think there's a lot to learn from great chefs about how they lead organizations. So check that one out and think about it. I think there's good stuff there. All right, well, for our final piece, for any of you who don't know, we teased it before the show, tomorrow, May 20th, Saturday, is World Metrology Day, and it's the perfect time to celebrate the science of measurement, which contributes so much to manufacturing excellence across the industry and across the world. We talked about it in your piece earlier from NIST. I mean, the guys at NIST do
crazy
fantastic
stuff.
Work, amazing work to really underpin what industry can do. Well, the roots of World Metrology Day actually go back more than 140 years to May 20th, 1875, and that was the date on which representatives from 17 nations signed the Treaty of the Meter in Paris. This act, which was the crowning achievement of the Meter Convention, happening in Paris at the same time, established the principles by which standards and measurements could be harmonized throughout the world. And none of which we now call quality really could have happened, if you think about it, in the 20th or 21st century without the Meter Convention. So this is a pretty big deal in our industry, this World Metrology Day. And if you'd like to learn more, check out www.worldmetrology.org. I'm sorry, worldmetrologyday.org. Check that out, because it's a really good event there to learn about why metrology is so important. And we always try to do something special for World Metrology Day each year, because our partner, the Coordinate Metrology Society, is the leading organization in portable, three-dimensional measurement for large volume, close tolerance projects in industry. And the group's annual event, the Coordinate Metrology Society Conference, is happening this summer in Park City, Utah. Dirk, you and I have gone to about the last 12 of these in a row, I think 12 or 13. And they're great. It's always a really amazing experience. Their website is at www.cmsc.org. And it's really the place you can go to find out how you can attend. This is truly one of a kind event. It's in a great location this year in Park City, Utah. It's going to really be fantastic, so check that one out. Now, Dirk, as I mentioned, we always do something a little special to commemorate World Metrology Day around this time. And this week, you wrote an article titled The Amazing Hidden World of Metrology Technology. And that ran in yesterday's issue of Quality Digest. You can see it right there. And you talked about the fast pace of technological change in general, and specifically looked at some really incredible recent innovations from a pair of CMSC vendors, Faro Technologies and Hexagon Manufacturing Intelligence. And there really are two very interesting projects or breakthroughs that they came up with. And it's interesting to see how that works in terms of industry today. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and not just, I mentioned Faro and Hexagon, also Mitutoyo. To me, what was fascinating is I subscribe to a service that sends me announcements on patent releases or patent submissions. And I subscribe, and I kind of keep my eyes on what's coming in from actually a lot of the people who go to the CMSC conference we just mentioned. Faro's there, Hexagon's there. A lot of these companies that I monitor are at the CMSC, and so I kind of see their patent submissions that come in. And one thing that you become really aware of when you do that is that these companies are always thinking ahead, not only on how do we improve our current products, because a lot of patent submissions are improvements on existing products or existing technology, how can I measure faster, better, that sort of thing, but also they're looking way ahead to what might be possible in the future. So I mentioned, Faro is looking at using drones, a pair of drones to do structured light measurement. One drone goes up and projects a pattern, another drone comes up, measures that pattern, they get 3D information from that. These drones can go anywhere. They could go up and measure the top of a skyrise. They could measure a boat they could do anything, because it's not based on sticking a piece of equipment on a tripod. Mm-hmm. Hexagon is looking at portable backpack carried 3D dimensional equipment. And some of this stuff they aren't products. They may never even become products. Yeah. They're just ideas. They get, of course, obviously they patent them because they want to lock down the idea should they decide to productize it. They want to make sure they have the patent for it.
Patent for it, sure.
But you get a sense of what's going on in the world of metrology and how this is always evolving, and it's very kind of below the surface. I mean, you don't have somebody like a Steve Jobs, may rest in peace, get up there in his black turtleneck and make this big announcement. This all stuff it's not like consumer electronics. This stuff is so hidden, and you go to a trade show and you see these crazy pieces of equipment that can measure to sub-micron accuracies in some cases, and you're going, what the heck? This is amazing. Nobody knows about it, but you're using the equipment that's made by this stuff all the time. And it's possible because companies, like the companies you would see at the CMSC, are working on these products continuously, just smart men and women just constantly thinking ahead. How can they tweak? How can they innovate? And then a few years later, 10 years later maybe, you see a product roll out.
But like you say, like I was saying before, I mean, the science comes first. I mean, the science comes first, and then the engineering kind of comes into place from there.
And let's talk about that. The reason we cover NIST a lot, because a lot of the advancement that NIST makes is kind of the basis of the science in many cases. And other organizations, Oak Ridge and NIST and Livermore, and sometimes just privately funded by companies like Hexagon and Farrell, their own research, lays the groundwork for the science and discoveries, and then eventually this trickles through and enables a product that wouldn't have been possible before. Well, now it's possible. Terahertz sensors we were talking about at NIST. Well, who knows? 10 years from now, that sensor might make its way into an industrial metrology product. Right? So the science comes first, then somebody says, hey, I could use that idea to implement, some sort of new type of measurement scheme that'll be used by industry. And it's just, to me, the whole process is really fascinating.
We see the medical device a lot too. Things are like with blood detection. I mean, there's a lot of things that science discovers, and the product kind of finds its way to the science rather than the other way around so much. And it's really fascinating to me how this bubbles up. And what I'm interested in is stuff that's happening now. We'll see maybe in 2025 that we don't even know. We can't even conceive right now some of the stuff that they're researching.
And by the way, to tie this back actually into World Metrology Day, none of this actually would be possible if measurement wasn't harmonized, standardized across the. I mean, when we know that when we measure something to 300 nanometers in the United States. That is exactly the same as 300 nanometers in France, in Russia, in Iran, in Iraq, no matter where, it's a standard, and that allows the transfer of knowledge and the transfer of information, the transfer of ideas across borders where it wouldn't have been possible if you didn't have those standards. Everybody would be working with something different like they used to many years ago, and it wouldn't make sense, right? And now it does.
It's incredible stuff, and again,
it all comes together at the CMSC show,
and that's what I was going to just say.
Park Spring, Utah.
It's a great it really is a great opportunity and the best opportunity at CMSC is to talk to a lot of these engineers who are right there on the floor. I mean, if you have a problem, a project, whatever, I mean, it really is the place to go. So check it out again, www.cmsc.org. to find out more about the upcoming show. All right, well, that is our show for this week, but before we go, we want to thank our sponsor. Dirk just mentioned him earlier in his piece. Mitutoyo Corporation is the world's largest provider of measurement and inspection solutions, offering the most complete selection of machines, sensors, systems, and services, with a line encompassing CMMs, vision, form, and finish measuring machines, as well as precision tools and instruments, and metrology data management software. Mitutoyo's nationwide network of metrology centers and support operations provides application, calibration, service repair, and educational programs to ensure that their more than 6,000 metrology products will deliver measurement solutions for their customers. For more information, visit www.mitutoyo.com or click on the banner ad just below or just to the right of this here video player screen.
And speaking of Mitutoyo, also we have just finished a series of how-to measurement videos, happen to be sponsored by Mitutoyo. These videos show you how to use or calibrate various types of measurement tools, hand tools typically, micrometers, calipers, gauge blocks, dial indicators, or even how to read a vernier scale. Do you know how to read a vernier scale? Well, if you don't, there's a video that shows you how to do it. These topics are taught by Craig Howell of CPM Labs, one of our partners just south of us here down in Rancho Cordova, California, and shot right here in our studio in our world headquarters in Chico, California. These videos will appear on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/TechnoRotziLive. You can subscribe to that channel to get updates on these videos. Also, you'll probably see them promoted in upcoming newsletters and so forth.
Yes, you will.
There's about, I don't know, 10 or 11 of them so far.
A lot of great information.
Really good information. They're short, 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that, showing you how to use a particular type of instrument.
And Craig is a great instructor.
And Craig is a great instructor.
And you do a pretty nice job there too, Dirk.
I stand there and look smart.
All right, well, that's our show again. We want to remind you about DNV's webinar. Thank you again to Violet Masoud for being on the show. She's going to be presenting the webinar, Risk Management, a Hands-On Approach and Transition Experience, this Thursday, May 25th at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. As I mentioned, Violet Masoud, who we spoke with earlier, will be presenting, along with Jason Telzak of JT Environmental Consulting. And Dirk's going to be your host, so check out the article from DNV below for the registration link, or of course keep an eye on your email inbox for more details next week. Well, thanks all for joining us. Thank you, Dirk, for being there. Thanks again, Violet Masoud. We'll see you next week.
So long.
Bye.